So, what is biotechnology and why you should know about it? Simply put, biotechnology is technology based on biology. More about it later. Well, before we dive in, let me quickly show you the outline of today's topic. So, in this video, we are going to be introduced with biotechnology. Then we learn about some everyday uses of biotechnology. We learn about applications of biotechnology like agriculture, environment, healthcare, and food processing. And then we'll talk about transgenic organisms. And we'll also talk about modern genetically modified foods. And then we'll talk about if GMOs are bad. And finally, we will summarize the video. So, what is biotechnology? Biotechnology is the use of living organisms to produce or develop products. For example, bacteria are used to produce cheese. Synthetic insulin and synthetic growth hormone and diagnostic tests to detect various diseases are just some examples of how biotechnology is impacting medicine. Biotechnology has also proved helpful in refining industrial processes, in environmental cleanup, and in agriculture production. Now let's talk about some of everyday use of biotechnology. Let's begin with fabrics. Polyester is a synthetic polymer fiber produced from fossil fuel and is used to make clothing, blankets, carpets, and other fabrics. Many biochemicals are used in the production of dyes, tanning agents, nylon, and polyester. Now comes personal care products. Biochemicals are used in processes to formulate personal care products such as makeup, shampoos, and skincare. Biotechnology is significantly more efficient than traditional skincare products, as stem cells have the capability of cellular regeneration, while the gold standard of the market, laser, are extremely expensive, whilst merely changing skin pigmentation as opposed to healing scars. Now comes foods. Take vinegar for example. Ever thought, how do we make vinegars? When barley is processed with a microorganism called yeast, it generates alcohol. Then you add acetic acid bacteria and get your desired vinegar. How cool is that? Okay, see another example. We know how bread is made. The dough is added with organisms like yeast, which help in releasing certain chemicals. The reaction ultimately gives a soft and fluffy loaf on baking. Here we have used yeast organism to obtain the product of our interest. So, do we mean that bread making is a part of biotechnology? Well, kind of. Processes like fermentation are considered as a part of classical biotechnology as they include the utilization of organisms. Thus, obtaining products for human benefit like food items, medicines, hybrid crops are all possible due to biotechnology. Now come drinks. Let's take wine. Now wine is usually made from the grapes. Well, how can grapes get converted to drinks like wine? This is where the microorganism yeast comes into play. It feeds on the sugars present in the grape juice and releases alcohol and carbon dioxide as byproducts. Here, a complete organism is used for the processing of grape juice and to convert it into wine. Let's now talk about the applications of biotech. So biotechnology has applications in 4 major industrial areas, including healthcare, crop production or agriculture, non-food industrial uses of crops or other products like biodegradable plastics, vegetable oil, and biofuels. And don't forget about the environmental uses. Let's continue to transgenic organism or genetically modified organisms, GMOs. GMOs are organisms which contains DNA from another organism integrated into its genomic DNA. Take the banana we eat today. But what exactly genetically modified means anyway? And how are these foods created? To answer this question, we need to go back in time about 10,000 years. That's when people first started domesticating animals and cultivating plants for food. By picking organisms with desirable traits and mating them together over and over again, people were able to mold species to meet their dietary needs. Watermelon could be a classical example, which started out as a small nut-sized bitter fruit. The watermelon we eat today are huge in size and very juicy and sweet. How that happened? Well, over thousands of years, ancient farmers transformed this little thing into the delicious sweet treat we like to eat today. We now know those ancient farmers were manipulating the DNA of those plants. Scientists call this process of modification artificial selection. And it made all kinds of unappetizing plants edible, from wheat to rice to almonds to bananas. It's believed that corns were first cultivated by humans about 10,000 years ago. However, at that time, corn was a lot different to what we have today. Corn started out as a tropical grass. The earlier ancestor of corn that we know of is something called teosinte, with small, nearly inedible kernels. Over thousands of years, ancient farmers in Mexico transformed the grass into the delicious starchy treat we like to eat today. As few as 5 changes in its genome, the strands of DNA that encode for protein, create the dramatic differences we see between teosinte and corn. Again, this process is artificial selection. Let's continue to the modern genetically modified foods. So what's new in the modern GMOs? The basic difference is the speed and precision with which we can make changes. Now, instead of selectively breeding for traits, we can go directly to the DNA responsible, snip it out and transplant it into newly developing plants and animals. If these snippets come from the same species, scientists call the new organism cisgenic. Cis means the same. But if the DNA comes from a completely different plant or animal, scientists call the new organism transgenic. Trans means cross. For example, these fluorescent peaks, they glow green because they contain a gene from a luminescent jellyfish. And in the last 30 years, we have begun to see the food equivalent. Corn that makes bacterial toxins poisonous to pets, tomatoes that makes the antifreeze proteins from fish, and even cows that produce human milk. So, are GMOs bad? You may be wondering if this kind of over-manipulation is safe. That's debatable. Well, all of the GM foods currently on the market have been thoroughly tested. But the verdict's still out on some of the more exotic transgenic pairings. Personally, I tend to buy all organic foods. But I am excited to see how far biotechnology can go. Maybe one day, we will see all glowing foods in the dark. We are at the end of today's video. Let's now recap what we covered so far. We introduced and talked about biotechnology and how it's used in everyday life. We learned about its application and GMOs. We know about modern genetically modified foods and concluded that not all GMOs are bad. Let's wait to see the new era of biotechnology for human benefits.